What's up, family? It is Caden with Urban Finance. I am here today with my brother Uzziah from the Uzziah Show, and we're going to have a conversation on do black men still need to be the breadwinners, or do black men need to be the breadwinners in the family? I've known this brother, or I should say, I've followed this brother from Black Men's Career even before I started my YouTube channel. So I'm excited to have a conversation with him today. Uzziah, can you tell the folks a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So welcome and thank you guys so much. I'm honored to be here. My name is Isaiah Israel. I'm a professional business consultant. And in 2013, I paid off over $95,000 in student loans 2 years after graduating from Baylor University. I spent my 20s in corporate America working for Hewlett Packard, which at the time was the biggest technology company in the world. And, when I started paying off my student loans, man, it felt pretty hopeless, right? Like I never thought that I'd be able to get out of debt. But then once I started being successful at getting out of the debt, that's when I started thinking, man, it really would be awesome if I could show my friends how to do it. So I started putting together videos on YouTube about how I paid off my debt. And then soon enough, that turned into a full-time business. So at 26, I quit my job in corporate America, and I've been a full-time online entrepreneur ever since. I'm a real estate investor. I'm a best-selling author. Man, I'm just so blessed to have done this. And I'm born from South Central LA. So if I could do it, I know that anybody can do it.
Awesome, man. That is an absolutely beautiful story. And so, just so the folks know, we're going live from both of our pages. And so,
Yes.
if Uzziah, if you want to tell the folks how they can support you on your page.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Please check out my channel. It is called The Uzziah Show. We do shows 6 days a week from Sunday through Friday. Just check me out on YouTube at The Uzziah Show. Please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you can see whenever we go live.
And for those of you that are on the Uzziah Show channel, my name is Caden, and I run my YouTube channel is called Urban Finance. And so it's a pleasure to see you guys. It's a pleasure to have you in this conversation. We'll be looking at the comments live, and we'll be thanking you guys live for what you're doing. I know you guys will be giving from both of the channels, so thank you in advance for that. As you know, you can give super chats or super stickers if you're enjoying the show. And so we just look forward to having an engaging conversation. And so really jumping right into it. Thank you for everyone that's in the chat right now. Peter Harris, Purpose Driven Life, Brandon, Ariel Israel. And so we look forward to you guys joining our conversation, and feel free to participate in the conversation as well. You guys know this is YouTube, and so smashing the like button absolutely helps with the YouTube algorithm. So please go ahead and do that. So Uzziah, let's jump into it. When I say breadwinner, what does that mean to you? To be the breadwinner in your family, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think the traditional definition of a breadwinner is somebody that makes more money than their spouse. This is the person that makes the most money in the household. So the breadwinner is looked at as the provider. The breadwinner is the one that is really relied upon in terms of paying the bills. Pretty much, this is the person that oftentimes is viewed as maybe the leader of the household finances. Now, it's not always that way. Sometimes you have people that may make more money than their spouses, but they may not be good at managing their finances. But traditionally, the breadwinner has always been viewed as the person that makes the most money in the relationship. And they're the ones that, almost kind of have a certain prestige
Mm.
because they're the one that makes the most money.
Yeah, no, I was talking to my wife right before we got on. I asked her, when I say breadwinner, what do you think? And
Right.
she immediately said, when I hear breadwinner, I think of the person that makes the most money in the household. That is the traditional. And I actually Googled breadwinner, and the first definition that came up when I Googled it wasn't that definition, actually. It just
Really?
had the person that earns money for the family, you know.
Oh,
So anyone
wow.
that earned money for the family could be considered a breadwinner. But when I looked at the history of the word, it has, or how we colloquially use it as well, it was that the person, the primary income bringer in the family. And so there's actually those two definitions out there. And so, you know, I would say this, I don't know, and this may be a bad preface, but you know, I don't know if this comes off as sexist today or not. Um, but I would say that historically, when you think of the breadwinner, you would think about the male in the household, the man in the household,
Facts.
the man being the head of the household. And so
Right.
that's how we have historically think of a breadwinner or who the breadwinner is. And so the question is, we know that, you know, black women and women in general today are starting to make more money than men, you know,
Right.
and black women, I think on average makes more money than the average black guy, are more educated, college educated. And so the question is, do black men still need to be the breadwinner in the household? Do black men need to be the breadwinner in the household? And what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I
Hmm,
think that, in spite of what we see happening in society, biology is biology, right?
mhm, mhm,
I think by nature, women look to men to be providers. And I think that men look to women to be a support system and a helpmeet,
mm,
regardless of how much money a person is making, because, we all have different career paths, which lends itself to different skills, which brings about different finances. It still doesn't change the fact that a woman, even if she's a high earning woman, still wants a sense of security from a man.
mm,
And a man, regardless of a woman's income, still wants a woman to support that man. And
mm,
so I think that's the reason why there is a significance for a man to be a breadwinner. And I kind of want to be clear about this as well, Caden, and I want to give a big shout out to you and shout out to everybody that tuned in. I definitely want to give a big shout out to my brother, Yasha Allah, for the $20 super chat. And I want to point out that, when you think about these so-called power couples that are out there,
mm,
I think we also have to acknowledge that sometimes breadwinner should also include male leadership.
mm,
I say that because, like, when you look at Jay-Z and Beyonce, right? You're
mhm,
looking at a
mhm,
billion-dollar couple right there. They've built an empire. And I'm pretty sure that there were some years within the marriage that Beyonce might have made more money than Jay-Z.
mm,
But that
mm,
didn't take away from Jay-Z's leadership. Like, it
mm,
didn't diminish him, it didn't emasculate him. And I think that sometimes we've got to really dig deeper on this conversation, man, because we tend to, look so closely at a dollar
mm,
that we tend to think that the dollar dictates the role. A
mm,
man can still be a leader in his household, even if both parties make good money.
mm, That's good. So I guess if you, so you gave a little what you thought of the traditional interpretation of breadwinner, and it
Right.
seems when you're thinking of the breadwinner or male or leadership in the household, you think of it from, you know, what the guy could provide. So I guess what is your definition of breadwinner? Your personal definition of who's the breadwinner in the household, what it means to be the breadwinner.
Yeah, like I said, man, I still go off of at least what I thought the title was before you told me that the title was something different. In our community, I was always under the impression that the breadwinner is just the person that makes the most money. But I think
Mm,
that's really interesting, Caden, because I think that that speaks to the fact that in a lot of traditional marriages, it's still structured in a way where maybe the man is the only one that's producing income,
mm,
right?
mm,
I think that as we live in this modern world, it's evolving in such a way where having two incomes in one household is the norm. And while I don't necessarily think that there is any problem with that, I do think that this is the reason why I kind of add on to the topic of breadwinner in the sense of who is the leader.
Mm,
If you have a husband that's making $100,000
mhm,
and you have a wife that's making $105,000,
mhm,
well, the wife may be looked at as the traditional breadwinner, so to speak, but the man may be the one who's taking both of their finances
mhm,
and actually setting a direction for the family.
mhm,
He may be outlining, family goals, how to create generational wealth. And I think that there is something to be said about that, even in the absence of being the highest earner. Does that make
mm.
sense? So I think that I almost would argue that we kind of have to modify our outlook on it. In an ideal world, Caden, the man would make the most money
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and the man would set the direction because he's the head of the household.
Mhm,
However, I think that as we look at the society where our sisters, Black women, are the most educated, I think that it lends itself to having the conversation at least. Should there be somewhat of a distinction from income and leadership? Just because you
mm,
make a
mhm,
certain amount of money, that does not necessarily guarantee that you are looked at as the leader of making wise decisions for
mm.
the household.
So that's super interesting, and I love what you're saying so far. And it's interesting because when you first said the man needs to be the breadwinner in the household, I thought to myself, I disagree. I don't
Okay.
think the man needs to be the breadwinner in the household. But when you explained what you meant about male being the man being the leader or leading his household in a way that shows effective leadership and how he goes about leading his household, I completely agree with you. And so it's interesting because in just googling breadwinner, we have those two definitions that are pretty different from each other. One that says the breadwinner is the sole provider of the household, and or the breadwinner is someone who earns money for the household. So anyone who's earning money for the household is bringing in bread essentially to the household, and so they're the
Right.
breadwinners. And so
Absolutely.
but I like what you're saying, because what you're saying is and if I can summarize it in an essential way, it doesn't matter who the breadwinner is if we're looking at it in a traditional sense. Do men still need to be leaders in their household? Do men still need to take that leadership role? Absolutely. You do believe 100% men need to be in that leadership position. While you guys are watching, let us know what you're thinking, saying you got a question or a thought. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do want to clarify my stance on this now, Caden.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do want to be clear. My stance, which I believe you were saying you may differ a little bit, and I'm excited about that.
Mhm,
I'm a firm believer that in an ideal marital structure,
mhm,
the man is the financial breadwinner in
mhm,
terms of yielding the highest income.
mhm,
The
mhm,
reason why I say in an ideal structure is because in certain situations, it will be harder for a man to assert himself as the leader
mm,
if, in fact, he makes less money than his spouse.
mm,
So, I don't know, if we're going to touch on this, but you also know, Caden, I'm a marriage counselor. I'm
mhm,
the head pastor of a church called True Spirit of Christ. And then one of the things that I do a lot besides just business consulting
mhm,
is giving married couples advice on how to strengthen their relationship. And
mhm.
there's so many times, man, that sisters will reach out to me and say, well, Uzziah, I feel like I'm the man in the relationship.
Come on
I
now. Come
feel
on
like,
now.
because my man looks for me to make the decisions,
Mm,
I feel like I got to be the one to call the shots. And
mhm,
sometimes when you make a certain amount of money in contrast to what your spouse is making,
mhm,
that can kind of create somewhat of a power struggle. I mean, think about it.
mm,
If you're a Black woman and you make $150,000 a year,
mhm,
your husband makes 30,000. It's going to be hard for you to buy into the concept that that man is a leader if you already have a programming that money is a sign of power, right? And so
Mm.
that's why, see, it's a very interesting conversation to have. And to be honest with you, man, I can't fully paint it with a broad brush
Paint
because
it,
you
paint
do.
it.
I can't put it all in one pocket
Mm.
because you have some sisters who may make $150,000, and regardless of what the man is making, she will still look to that man as the leader due to his guidance.
Mm.
But you also have a large portion of women who do feel very strongly that if a man makes less than them,
Mm.
it is hard for them to find a sense of respect or
Mm.
leadership from that man. And I think on both levels, I mean, that's real.
Yeah.
You can't change who people are. And that's the reason why I say that in an ideal construct, just to me personally, I do believe that if a man can make more money
Mhm.
than his spouse, then it can be beneficial because it can alleviate some of the
Mm.
situations in which some women, not all, may feel that it would be harder to respect a man or honor his leadership, all because to them, their money means power.
Ah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm gonna read some of the comments that's
Okay.
flowing in on it real quick. Purpose
Okay.
driven fates, Dr. Christina Nurse. I don't know who that is. That's actually my wife. She said, let's touch on it. And Nigel said the household dynamics flow a lot easier when the man is the breadwinner. However, if the
See?
woman makes the most money, the man needs to be the smartest and be in his masculine at all times.
Mm,
We
yeah.
have Ira. She said, I need your counsel, bro. We have Nigel. He also needs to be the problem solver. I love that. And Uzziah is saying some things on here. So, and I agree with everything you say. I agree 100% that ideally the man will be the breadwinner in the family, and I think that that is the best position to have a solid family structure
Right.
because I too believe the man is the head of the household, and so that's the ideal. The reality of it is that a lot of sisters will be very lonely if they were required to make more than if their husband had to make more than them, or they would be required to, and we wouldn't want this, but required to lower their standards or lower in terms of getting a job that maybe doesn't pay as much for their husband to make more than them. Because as I said before, black women, one, outnumber black men, and two, are more educated than black men. It's just the fact. And the number of black men that are incarcerated and then come out of prison even decrease that number. It's interesting though, I'm an associate pastor of a church. And
Right.
so I have a lot of pastors that are friends. And
Okay.
I posted a question the other day that said, and it was a little while back, maybe a month back or 2 months back. And I said, do men need to be financially stable in the relationship? Or do men need to be financially stable before they get married? And for me, that's an absolute.
Absolutely.
Do men need to be financially stable? Absolutely. And we can go into what we define as financially stable, but I believe a man needs to be financially stable heading into marriage. It's important to create that solid foundation. And it was interesting, and I know why. And I know why. A lot of the pastors on my page, who are young pastors, said no, a man do not need to be financially stable.
Are
And
you
the
serious?
truth of, yeah, yeah. And the reason, the reason why is because,
Okay.
and I'll use myself as is because people associate how much you make to being financially stable. And so when I
Okay.
say financially stable, I'm talking about making sound financial decisions for you and your family and things like that. When I'm saying financially stable, I'm saying making an effort to get out of debt. When I say financially, I'm talking about being mature with how you spend your money, but people always associate how much you make. And the truth, besides what the media tells you, pastors don't make that much money.
Right.
And God is so good that often He blesses. A lot of pastors have wives that are doctors and lawyers and do really well in life. And so you can be a pastor making $50,000, $75,000, But like you mentioned, your wife is a doctor making 150, $200,000. And so when I said financially stable, they're thinking, do I need to make more money than my wife?
Right.
And that's not the case necessarily. In an ideal situation, the man will be the provider. I had this quick story, and then I'll move on from this about something that happened between my wife and myself not too long ago. And she's on. She can say don't share if she doesn't want me to share it. And
Let's put it
so
out there.
you know, she had said to me, because it was during the pandemic and people were getting laid off from work. And
Okay.
so she said, Kaden, I feel heavily burdened right now because, what if I lose my job? What if I lose my job? And to be frank about it, my wife makes more money. She has a PhD from Harvard in biostatistic. And like I mentioned, I'm a pastor. She makes
Okay.
more money than me. And she
Right.
said, what if I lose my job? And it was heavy on her. And I said, babe, I've been preparing this from the time we got married. If you were to lose your job. And her concern wasn't necessarily if, I can pay the bills, but can we afford to send our son to private school? Can we still take
Mhm.
some of the trips? Not all of them, maybe a trip a year if I lose my job. And this is where male leadership came in. I told
Right.
her, give me 2 days. I prepared exactly what would happen if she lose her job. So I said, babe, we can send our son to private school for 3 years. We will have all the bills paid if you lose your job, just based on what I'm bringing in. And I'll still be able to take you on a trip here and there. And I said, I was previously a recruiter. And I said, do you think you can get a new job in 3 years? And she was like, absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
And with me breaking it down with her, like, we can still send our son to private school, we can still take trips, the bill will be taken care of, and you will have 3 years. I mean, whether you want to stay at home or 3 years to do, because I was a recruiter before this as well, a recruitment
Okay.
manager. Based
Same
on my
here.
wife's feel, she will find a job in like a week, like
Right.
literally. But it
Right.
was helpful for her to say, you have 3 years without even finding a job, and we can do all of the things that you would want to do in life just based on my income.
Right.
I think that is the type of leadership that women are looking for, or any family need, that know that, whether you make the most money or not, when things go astray, can you lead? Are you able
Absolutely.
to satisfy the areas that I feel discomfort in? And
Mhm.
I think that's what's so important, because somebody else may fall apart upon that question, or being put into that situation. But a man
Right.
that leads says, okay, what are your concerns? Here's our plan for this. How does that make you feel?
Right.
And it talks about, and the other thing I say to people all the time, it does not matter as much. It matters a little, but it does not matter how much you make when it comes to building wealth. You can
Okay.
make $150,000 and you can make $50,000, and the person that's making $50,000 can build wealth significantly faster. But it's about leadership. It's about structuring your assets, your resources, and what you have in a certain way that you will always have. But I digress. I just love talking about this. Love talking
Absolutely.
about these type of things. And so I guess, given what you know about the state of Black men in America, given what you know about what men need to be, I guess, how could Black men become more effective leaders? What would that look like? What do they need to do? And do you feel like the men that you know, or men that you've encountered, are being breadwinners in their family?
Yeah, great question, man. I think that the best thing that Black men can do at all times is to focus on their purpose, because their purpose will position them for all the success that they look for in life, whether that is financial, whether that's spiritual, whether that's marital. I truly believe that the most important thing for a man to do is to walk in his vision and his calling, and then everything else will be established from there. I think that one of the deterrents to male leadership is actually when men get dependent on other people or on the female gender in order to play a leadership role. God created us to be leaders. We are the head of our household. And so I think that, as much as we talk about leadership, if a man truly focuses on that and keeps that priority first under God, I think that a lot of other things will align. Now, when we talk about Black men being breadwinners, it's interesting. When we have the discussion about Black women being the most educated, I think that it's important to note that one's academic path does not necessarily dictate their net worth, right? So you got a lot of people that's graduating from college that are actually some of the poorest people in America right now because they're $100,000 in the red. When I graduated from college, I was really depressed because I was like, man, a newborn baby that has done nothing with their lives is actually wealthier than me because when I graduated, I racked up $100,000 in student loans. And just because I make a certain salary, my salary and my net worth are not one and the same. So I think one of the big challenges that we really need to overcome, Caden, is putting things in its proper place. You have a degree, but then there's income. You have income, and then there's net worth. And these are all three totally different things, even though they may seem correlated. I think in order for Black men to be breadwinners, regardless of their level of education, they must be purpose driven enough to constantly strive to be the best version of themselves, level up in terms of their skill sets, and then once they do that, they will always be in a position to produce, whether they are white collar or whether they are blue collar.
Mm,
Some of the highest income earning men in America are not guys that are college educated. These are
mm,
guys with, very solid trade skills, plumbers, construction workers, guys that have a lot of the trades that many corporate and professional men don't have.
mm,
They're making a lot more money because they didn't take out the same debt as college graduates, and they're able to leverage their skills in a market that has high demand.
mm. And so, I don't know if you've ever seen the meme, but I feel like I see it all the time on Facebook. There's this, guy dressed in a really nice suit and stuff like that. And they're like, he makes $100,000 a year, but has $250,000 in student loan. And
Right.
then there's like an electrician, and they're like, he
Mhm.
makes more money than him and no student loan. And
Right.
so, I guess so, but in the Black community, it still feels like we don't really value as much those trade education. And I guess, do you
Right.
think that's a disservice? And where do you think that comes from? Because I feel like most people, most parents who, are planning their children lives for success would push them through getting that higher education, regardless of how much money they're going to pay, how much debt they're going to have to take on. Do you think we're doing our children a disservice? Do you think there's a balance there? What's your thought? Do you think that would allow more Black men to become more successful if we were directing people to more of these potential trade schools, electricians, plumbers, even starting their own business?
I believe that the perception of success is killing the Black community.
Mm, mm,
I think the way in which we view what success looks like
mm,
is the very reason why we don't have it from an ownership perspective.
mm,
There was an article that was recently published by Wall Street Journal. And what the article shows is that us going to college is actually widening the racial
mm,
wealth gap. Many of us grew up in traditional households where our parents told us, go to school, make good grades so you can get a good job. And in the process of doing that and following that narrative, a lot of us, like myself, graduated with astronomical debt that
mm,
many of us don't know how to work our way out of. I mean,
mm,
even when you think about millennials in general, millennials may make a lot more money than that of generations that came before them, but we don't hold on to the wealth
mm,
because of the debt and because of how much we tend to struggle with financial illiteracy.
mm,
Now, going back to your question, I think the way that we look at success destroys us. We will
mm,
go to another Black man and say, you are not successful unless you have a master's degree,
mm,
you have a law degree, you have some uh certification that says you get to be in the in club.
mm,
But what is the cost, and is that actually tied to your natural strengths?
mm,
So somebody could grow up in a house and they could be very good with their hands. God wants them to be, one of the world's best construction workers. But
mm,
they got a mom and father that says, unless you are a politician, you won't
mm,
amount to anything.
mm,
Right. And so I think one of the most destructive things is that we tend to associate looking like success over actually being successful. I'm pretty sure that you're familiar with the book The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley.
yeah,
In that book, the author actually outlined that most people who are actually wealthy in America, they don't actually look like the perception of success. We
mm,
tend to
mm,
think success is you
mm,
drive a Rolls Royce,
mm,
you got a 2-3 story mansion,
mm,
you live out in the suburbs somewhere. That's the narrative that society feeds to
mm,
us. But when you actually study wealth in its truest form, you tend to find that these are people that shop at Walmart. They tend to operate off of a
mm,
budget. Their favorite car is a Ford F-150 pickup truck. So I think
mm,
one of the biggest things that we need to do, especially when we talk about this subject of breadwinner, Caden, is
mm,
we need to identify what does true success mean? Because to your point, you could be a brother that's making $75,000 a year as an electrician, having no debt
mhm,
and knowing how to properly manage your finances, but you might be overlooked for a guy, that may be a hotshot lawyer that has $150,000 in debt, and you have no control over your finances at all. Who's more
mm,
likely to be in the poorhouse? The
mm,
man that's $75,000 a year, but has a Roth IRA and a 401k established for himself, versus a guy that's a lawyer making 150,000 that has no budget,
mm,
that's maxed out their credit cards, that not paying off their student loans, saying I'm just going to hold on to it for the rest of their life. Like, this is the reason why I said initially that I think that sometimes we put too much weight
mm, mm,
over money just in terms of a salary alone. I think that if our community is going to be effective, I think that we need to look deeper into financial principles, budgeting. What are the steps of real wealth creation,
mm,
business ownership? Like, it's a lot more than just salary alone, man. That's the point that I'm getting at. And I think that as long as we look at these superficial indicators, like one's degree or salary on how much money they make alone, I think that we're always going to find ourselves struggling, because there's a growing community of people that actually are six-figure earners and they still live check to check, all because they don't understand financial literacy.
mm. No, that's beautiful, man. And it's so true. One of the things, and for those that follow my channel, one of the things that I talk about in my channel, I'm pretty transparent with my net worth. And one of the reasons why I'm transparent about it is because I think it allows people to get a different idea of, and I wouldn't, I'm not a millionaire yet, but my net worth,
You're
is
doing well.
yeah, doing really well, close to half of a million or half of a million pretty much.
Awesome.
And I drive a 2012 Honda Accord. And so I don't have anything visible of what wealthy would look like. And
Right.
what I've found in the Black community is that if you don't have the visible status symbol of what people think wealthy looks like, people
Hmm.
think you're broke or you don't have any money.
Right.
But like you mentioned with the book The Millionaire Next Door, what they found is a lot of the hedge fund managers were, or people that you think will have money don't have money because they have to get the status symbol of what money looks like. And
Right.
those that don't necessarily have to get the status symbols, so the fancy cars, the expensive suits and things like that, the live in a neighborhood, or what's the saying about, having a super expensive house, you can't afford, can barely pay your mortgage, you're living
Right.
paycheck to paycheck, you're in a very successful middle class neighborhood, but you're living paycheck to paycheck and probably going further and further in debt, just like someone who maybe is making minimum wage living in the projects. And
Right.
because people who has those status symbols of what wealth is tend not to be able to save and invest. And some people were talking about investing in a chat. And I always tell people this: the first $100,000 is the hardest, right? But after that first $100,000, at just a 10% rate of return, that's
Yeah.
$10,000 a year that your money is just making for you. That's more than most people can actually make for themselves.
Peyton.
And my point, or save in a month,
Hmm.
in a year. And my
Yeah.
point is this: the Black community are too often chasing the visible status symbols of wealth and
Right.
not often chasing wealth itself.
Right.
Um, and so, I have nothing against buying a fancy car, but I would like to do that with the returns for my investment and not with my child's college fund. And I
Yeah.
think often we we have a glorification of what wealthy looks like, and unfortunately, and we can potentially talk about this. Unfortunately, the truth of the matter is not certainly not all women, certainly not my wife, but there's this perception out there that, if you're a man, a Black man, any type of man, to be quite frank about it, if
Hmm.
you have those status symbols of wealth, you're more likely to get the type of woman that you potentially would want. Let's
Right.
talk from a physical attraction,
Hmm.
because men feel, it may or may not be true. I don't want to speak for women. I've seen it, but I don't want to speak for anyone. But men feel women are attracted to the status symbol of wealth, not true wealth, because no one really knows what someone has in their bank account. But
Right.
if you drive a nice car, live in a decent home, then you have the status symbol of wealth, and men know that is worth something to the other sex.
Right.
And so, do you feel like Black men chasing the status symbol of wealth is keeping them from being successful? And how can we go about changing the culture where people don't feel the need to get what I want in life? Let's say the right spouse, that I have to do these things and continue in this cycle, more or less. Even the job, like you mentioned before, you can be a very successful carpenter and a very poor lawyer, but the lawyer will probably get more attention because he's a lawyer, not
Right.
because he's bringing more to the table, not because he's making more, not because he's providing better leadership, just the status symbol. And how can we change that culture?
Yeah, man, you bring up a great question. And I think that you can only change it, but so much, right?
Mm,
Because I believe that the perception of status will always be there. Your appearance matters. And so people are often going to judge you by your appearance because they don't have anything else to go off of, right? Not everybody is going to say, well, hey, can you share with me your balance sheet? And, can you send me your past two statements in an email so I can look up all of your banking transactions on a PDF? Nobody's going to do that, right?
mm,
So traditionally, what people are going to do is they're going to make certain assumptions based upon how they perceive you. And
mm,
that's the reason why I honestly put a picture of me in my suit, in my branding, because for me as a
mm,
Black man, I do believe that in order for me to be actually acknowledged for my accomplishments, I have to look like I accomplished it. You know,
Mm.
I would love for me to just be in a t-shirt and flip-flops and talk about, hey, I paid off $95,000 in debt. Like I did it. I have the receipts.
Mhm.
But I think that, again, the perception of success is so popular in our culture that it's going to be hard to get away from that completely. I mean, that's just the way of the world.
Mm.
Biologically, we are wired to make certain observations within a person to influence what that means, right? So if women see a man, and there's all kind of prank videos on YouTube about this. A woman
Mhm.
will a guy will walk up to a woman and he'll start spitting game. The woman will reject her, like totally pass him up. Then he'll walk 2 steps forward into his Lamborghini, and then the woman that just rejected him will turn around and be like, "Oh, so yeah, so where are you going?"
Mm.
Oh yeah, I got time today. And a dude will be like, but 2 seconds ago, you wasn't checking for me. But now that you see that this is my car, now you're interested. On
Mm.
some level, that's biological. And
Mm.
we could give names for it, and we could say gold digger and cloud chasing, you could call it whatever you want. Women by nature want men that can provide. And so,
Mm.
because they look for outward showings of that, this is how sometimes this becomes a problem, especially in a society like this one, where it's all about hyper consumerism. Now, to answer your question about, well, what do we do about that? I think that it's up to us to change the narrative.
Mm.
I believe that it's up to brothers like, myself and yourself as content creators to make smart the new cool,
Mm.
to educate our community that, hey, listen, just because a brother is making X amount of money, that does not necessarily guarantee security. In fact, beyond just looking at the man's income, you may actually want to understand his net worth, because like you were saying, you may not have had a $400,000 year, but if you have a $400,000 net worth, that actually speaks more to your stability long term than that of a man that hit a lick one time. Because any man can have a windfall of money given to him at one point, but how do you successfully, maintain that over time, right? So I
Mm.
think that what we need to do is, I think that we need to make financial stability the new cool. We need to teach financial literacy. We need to educate our community on what that looks like. And we've got to change the narrative. I think the same way that hip hop culture has done a phenomenal job at, impressing their culture on the world, that, hey, you got
Mm.
to have, the Maybach Benz, you got to have, the shiny chains. And that means that you're balling. I think that we now have to see the opportunity that YouTube and all of these other social media platforms is actually leveling the playing field for us to now influence what bowling actually looks like.
Mm. That's interesting. And so Shelly says those women are shallow. And so I guess I ask you a question. Do you feel like women who chase, and I'll say the status symbol in life, are shallow? Do you feel that's shallow? Do you feel that's, or do you feel that that's what some people are supposed to do? Like, what are your thoughts?
Man, you really put me on a hot seat with that one. You know, I think that there's levels,
Mm.
right? I think that we're seeing some women who are gaming men purely based upon status and looks, right?
Mm.
So if you're not driving a Rolls Royce or Ferrari,
Mhm.
a woman won't talk to you. Some
Mhm.
women won't talk to you.
Mhm.
And I think that that's indicative of a woman's shallow character,
Mhm.
right? We already know what that is, y'all.
Mhm.
Y'all not silly. Y'all know what's
Mhm.
up.
Mhm.
But I think also at the same time, there's only so much that you can go on the other side of that as well, because if a woman does not look for some semblance
Mm-hmm.
of financial security or progress in a man, then I think that that speaks to a woman's standards also. I think it's very commendable for a woman to want to build something from the ground up with a man. But, I think honestly, I tend to tell brothers, already have yourself established before
Mm-hmm.
you bring somebody else into your life.
Mm-hmm.
You have nothing, and you bring someone else into your nothingness, then y'all are going to be doing a lot of fighting about a lot of nothing. I mean, let's be real. The number one cause of divorce in America is because of personal finances. So we could soapbox all day about how, a woman shouldn't look for a man for the finances and how that's bougie and that's this and that. But I do encourage brothers that if you are wise enough to discern, a gold digger from a woman that is genuinely looking to build a life with you, you have to also consider the fact that you cannot fault a woman completely for wanting some semblance of stability. Because if you as a man are doing your job, that will come with the territory. You won't have to worry as much about, oh, well, she won't accept me because I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that. If you can just keep the focus on your priorities, then that will help to kind of alleviate a lot of problems. And this brings me back to what I was saying before. There are a lot of relationships that go back and forth in terms of who's making the most money. In my marriage, this is something that goes back and forth. My wife, she's a successful woman, college educated, another Baylor graduate like myself. She's a six-figure earner. And we've traded years in terms of highest income. But again, like I said, just speaking personally, in an ideal framework, with you being that male leader, right? Because that leadership is important, because just because you make a lot of money, that doesn't necessarily mean that a woman's going to respect you either. If you have that strong male leadership and are viewed as the head of your household and you can make good money, then that will alleviate a lot of problems. It doesn't mean that just because you don't have every box checked perfectly, that you can't have a great relationship, because even the most successful of men fall on hard times.
Yeah.
But I think that if a man focuses on really pursuing his passion and honing in on his gifts, he can make things a lot easier for him.
No, that's nice. And I always say, I'm hard pressed to call anybody a gold digger. And I say that to say, and we know that there are gold diggers out there, but I'm
Right.
hard pressed to call anybody a gold digger just because, and I always say, as a man, when I met my wife, the main thing I was concerned about was her looks. When
Right.
I saw her, I was like, "Oh, she fine. That's my
Right.
wife." I literally told my boy, "That's my wife."
Yeah.
And she had a really nice personality when I talked to her. She was an amazingly smart woman. But I pretty much I didn't determine she was my wife till after the conversation. But I talked to her because of her looks, purely
Right.
on her looks. It had nothing else but her looks. I didn't know she went to Harvard. I didn't know she was in a PhD program. She looked good.
Right.
And so as a guy, and most guys that I know judge girls or decide that first instance of a girl to talk to, that first interaction, 100% based on looks. It's never like, I think she's really smart. I think she's a smart person. Let me go talk to her. It's usually, that's my type right there. Oh, she's real fine. And
Right.
so on the other hand, guys look for looks. Women look for financial stability or a guy that can provide in a relationship. And
Mhm.
so if the woman is not looking at, oh, he's fine, let me talk to him, but then sees his Lambo and like, okay, he
Right.
could provide, let me talk to him. Is there much of a difference? And I generally ask myself that question: is there much of a difference? So if you guys are watching, feel free, because some people may feel there's much of a difference. And so let me know in the comment section if you think. And I think there's a fine line. Like, we can tell a gold digger
Right.
from a woman is just like, okay, I think he's financially stable, sustainable, and makes. And I think it's okay to have a range as a woman, and it sounds crazy. Um, but in terms like, okay, I'm looking for a brother. Now you may stay single doing this the rest of your life, but I think standards are okay.
Right.
Say, okay, I'm looking for a brother that makes six figures. We saw what's that brother name? I forget his name. Kevin Samuel.
Right.
Like, I think there are women all the time that gets on the show and said, "I'm looking for a six-figure earner,"
Right.
and I
Mhm.
think that's fine. Like, I think it's okay to have standards. And then there are women who say, "Okay, I don't need six figures, but I need 75 to 100."
Mhm.
And I think it's the same way for men who look at women that say, okay, she needs to be at least a seven or an eight, or men who be like, no, she needs to be an eight or nine, and men
Yeah.
who says nine or 10. And so I guess this is a two-part question.
Okay.
Am I crazy for thinking that way? And where do you feel is the line between, I guess, let's use Shelley word, shallowness and standards? Where's the line between shallowness and standards? I guess on both sides.
Got you. I feel that shallowness is when you're going purely off of finances alone. And I think standards are a reflection of what you want out of life based
Mm,
upon um, your life's plan. So let me kind of give an example, if I may. So you may have some women that don't really have any long-term plan in terms of how they're going to play a part in a healthy family structure, right? They're just out here living
mm,
life. Hot girl
mm,
summer. And so the hot girl summer, she's not necessarily looking for, okay, a man with morals, a man with principles, a man of a godly presence. She's just looking for who has the bag,
mm,
and whoever has the biggest bag, that's
mm,
where I'm going.
mm,
In my opinion, that's shallow
mm, mm,
because there's nothing that you are basing your
mm,
selection off of outside of finances in general, right?
mm,
It's just purely based upon perception. I mean, even when you talk, Caden, about, okay, when I was, checking out my wife, I was looking purely at looks. You may have done that in the moment because that's what gave off a first impression, but
mm,
you definitely have not been married all of these years off of looks alone.
mm,
Some of the prettiest women that I've ever met are the most single,
mm,
all because there has to be something outside of your
mm,
looks and appearance in order to sustain a man.
mm,
So shallow is just a function of money. Whoever's got the biggest
mm,
bag, that's what I'm going for. And if a man isn't, at the top 1% of the 1%, I'm not dealing with him. I
mm,
think when we talk about being of substance and having standards, this is when you're saying, okay, well, you know what? I'm a hardworking woman that knows how to support a man and operate in my feminine energy.
mm,
I'm looking to have a successful marriage where I want to have, 3 or 4 kids. And in order for me to have a healthy family structure, according to the things that I want out of life, I must attract
mm,
this kind of man. Now, we know that this woman is not being shallow because she's taking the time to
mm,
self reflect on the kind of woman she needs to
mm,
be in order to attract that man. There's
mm,
nothing wrong with you wanting a better life. A lot of us came from the hood and we wanted to get out of it. But if you're operating off of standards and substance, you're actually doing the work. You're
yeah,
actually
yeah,
mapping out, okay, if I could close my eyes, what would my dream life look like today? Where would I live? Who would I be around? What would my family structure look
mm,
like? If you're willing to put in the work
mm,
to
mm,
make yourself the kind of woman who can live that type of life, then I don't see a problem with it.
mm. No, that's beautiful, man. That's beautiful. And I would say, while I talk to my wife because of looks, I certainly didn't marry her because of her looks.
Absolutely.
And there's a long, because my wife is an amazing woman,
Right.
and so there's a long list of reasons why I marry her.
Right.
But two reasons why I marry her, I would say one is that I've always told myself I need a wife that if I died, I would be happy with how she raised my child. And I've
Right.
met a lot of women that I wouldn't leave my children with that were beautiful, you know? And
Absolutely.
so that was one of the first reasons I was like, this woman is for me. And two, she gave me peace and brought joy into my life. She was someone I can say, okay, I can spend the rest of my life with her. And for me, that's what marriage is, a lifelong commitment. And
There you go.
so those, two out of many reasons that I was like, this woman is the one for me. But I know we're up on time. It is 8:03. Uzziah, we definitely have to, even if it's not this topic, continue this conversation or having
Part two.
conversations because I truly enjoyed my time with you today. I know, but I do want to be respectful about the hour. If you want to tell the folks how they can support you again, any last words, you can do so.
Absolutely, man. Well, first, I just want to thank you so much, Caden. I really appreciate you reaching out to me, brother. And I love this show, man. I love what you're about. I love what you represent. And I pray for nothing but blessings for you and your household, man. We as brothers, we need to see more examples of brothers like you in our community. So keep up the good work and shout out to your wife because I know she's doing great things in, really creating a great family alongside you, man. So many props to that. For those of you that want to tune in to more of my content, please make sure that you check out my show, The Uzziah Show. We do live shows 6 days a week from Sunday to Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m. Central. As I said, I am a real estate investor, a best-selling author, and an entrepreneur. But when you come to the Uzziah Show, it's all about how you can start your own business, get out of debt, and create generational wealth. So I thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please make sure that you subscribe to the Uzziah Show, and I can't wait to see you on the next broadcast.
Awesome. Thank you guys again. Thank you for everyone that joined us both on the Urban Finance channel and the Uzziah Show channel. We can't do this without you guys. You know how the YouTube algorithm works. So go ahead and smash that like button. Feel free to share this with someone. And God bless you and continue to live your best life.